4 years ago, a mother's world shattered when her young daughter vanished from a child care center restroom at a busy mall, leaving nothing but questions and heartbreak. Despite countless posters, tireless cooperation with authorities, and endless nights chasing every possible lead, the child remained missing. But then one day, while walking along a pristine beach, the mother noticed a private wedding ceremony taking place in a cordoned-off section, and what she saw in that moment made her freeze in horror. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Angela Haro made her way through South Key Mall in Miami, her heart heavy with the weight of 4 years of grief and uncertainty at 45 years old. She had aged more than her years suggested. The lines on her face, etched deep with worry and sorrow. The late afternoon sun filtered through the mall's skylights, casting long shadows as she moved purposefully from one location to another, renewing the posters of her missing daughter, Isabel. The mall's familiar sights and sounds washed over her, a cruel reminder of the day her world had shattered as she carefully replaced each worn poster with a fresh one. Angela's mind drifted back to that fateful day 4 years ago. She could still hear the echo of Isabel's laughter, see the sparkle in her blue eyes as she begged to go shopping with her mother. "Please, Mommy, I promise I'll be good." Isabel had pleaded, her small hand tugging at Angela's sleeve. Angela had sighed, exhausted from a long day at her food vendor store. "Not today, sweetheart. Mommy needs to do some shopping alone. How about you stay at the child care center? Little explorers for a bit. I'll get you your favorite ice cream afterward." The memory of Isabel's disappointed face haunted Angela as she smoothed out a new poster. Her daughter's frozen smile staring back at her, she remembered the moment of relief she had felt when Isabel had finally agreed, skipping off to the child care center without a backward glance. If only she had known it would be the last time she'd see her daughter. As Angela moved through the mall, she noticed the digital displays flickering to life, each one showing Isabel's missing person, and it was a small gesture from the mall management, an attempt to make amends for their security failures. But for Angela, it was both a comfort and a torment. A reminder that the world hadn't forgotten Isabel, but also that she was still out there somewhere, lost and alone. The bustling sounds of the mall faded into the background as Angela's mind replayed the chaos of that day. The shrill fire alarm, the panicked crowds, the sickening realization that Isabel was nowhere to be found. Remembered the hours of frantic searching, the growing dread as security footage revealed a shadowy figure entering the restroom and carrying her daughter away. Angela paused at the entrance to Little Explorers, her hand trembling as she affixed the last poster to the glass. The child care center had changed since that day. New management increased security measures, but the pain it represented remained constant. 2 security guards stood at attention nearby, their presence a stark reminder of how things had changed. Angela nodded to them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. They had been here that day too, helpless to prevent what had happened. As she stepped back to survey her work, Angela felt the familiar ache in her chest. 4 years of searching, of hoping, of praying for a miracle. 4 years of waking up each morning, wondering if today would be the day she'd finally find answers. The mall around her continued its rhythmic hum of activity. Shoppers chatting, children laughing, life moving forward. But for Angela Haro, time stood still, frozen in the moment when her little girl had vanished. Without a trace, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the long night ahead tonight. Like every night for the past 4 years, she would go home to an empty house, surrounded by memories of a life that now felt like a distant dream. But tomorrow she would wake up and continue her search, because somewhere out there, Isabel was waiting to be found. As Angela stood lost in thought outside, as I sighed Little Explorers, a warm hand gently touched her shoulder. She turned to find Linda Kosher, the new owner of the child care center, standing beside her with a compassionate smile. "Angela," Linda said softly, pulling her into a comforting embrace. I thought I might find you here today." Angela relaxed into the hug, grateful for the support of the woman who had become more than just an acquaintance over the years. Linda had taken over Little Explorers in the wake of the scandal, determined to transform it into a safe haven for children. Her dedication to security and her unwavering support for Angela had forged a bond between them that transcended their professional relationship. "Thank you. Thank you, Linda," Angela murmured as they parted, "for letting me put up the posters even today, for everything." Linda shook her head, her kind eyes filled with understanding. "You never need to thank me, Angela. This is the least I can do. How are you holding up?" Angela's gaze drifted back to the poster of Isabel, her heart constricting as well as can be expected. "I suppose it's just hard to believe it's been 4 years already." Linda nodded, her expression somber. "I can't even imagine what you're going through. Has there been any news? Any leads at all?" Angela shook her head, the familiar feeling of hopelessness washing over her. "Nothing. It's like she just vanished into thin air. Thin air. The police say that with each passing year, the chances of finding her..." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Linda reached out, squeezing Angela's hand. "Don't lose hope. Angela, miracles happen every day, and know that we're all still here, supporting you and searching for Isabel." Angela managed a weak smile, grateful for Linda's unwavering optimism. "I know it's just the not knowing is the worst part. Is she safe? Is she happy? Is she..." She couldn't bring herself to voice her darkest fears. Linda guided Angela to a nearby bench, sitting down beside her. "I can't imagine the weight you carry every day, but Angela, you can't blame yourself. What happened wasn't your fault." Angela's eyes filled with tears, wasn't it? If I had just taken her shopping with me that day, if I hadn't been so impatient with her? "No," Linda said firmly. "The only people to blame are the ones who took her. You were just being a mother, trying to balance work and family, like so many of us do." Angela nodded, but the guilt still gwetted her. "I used to complain about how hard it was, being a single mother. The long hours, the constant juggling act. Now, I'd give anything to have those days back." Linda listened patiently as Angela continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Coming here every day, opening the shop, going home to an empty house. Sometimes it feels like I'm just going through the motions, like I'm living for nothing." "Oh, Angela," Linda said, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're living for Isabel every day. You keep searching every time you put up these posters. You're fighting for her. That's not nothing." Angela wiped her eyes, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dump all of this on you. You have your own life, your own concerns." Linda shook her head emphatically. "Never apologize for sharing your feelings, Angela. That's what friends are for." She paused, considering something. "You know, I run a support group for parents who've been through similar experiences. Maybe you'd like to join us sometime." Angela hesitated. I remember you mentioned it last year. I think I can join sometimes. When is the meeting?" "We meet every Friday at 7:00 p.m. here at one of the South Key meeting room." Angela nodded understandingly. Linda smiled and reached out to her hand. "There's no pressure. The offer is always open whenever you feel ready. Sometimes being around people who truly understand what you're going through can be incredibly healing." Angela glanced at her watch, realizing how much time had passed. "You're right, Linda. Actually, I don't mind attending the session tonight. I don't think I could just stay home tonight." Linda glanced at the clock on the wall. The numbers glowed, 5:00 p.m., and her heart sank. A look of shock flashed across her face, quickly replaced by guilt. "Oh my God," she gasped, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I can't believe this. How foolish of me. I invited you to the support group. But I have a flight to Puerto Rico this evening. I completely forgot." Angela's eyebrows lifted slightly. though she quickly masked her disappointment. "So, you won't be at the support group tonight?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Linda sighed, shaking her head. "No, I wouldn't be able to make it, maybe next week." Angela forced a small smile, but the flicker of letdown in her eyes was unmistakable. "That's okay," Angela said, her voice even though she couldn't quite hide the way her shoulders slumped. "Have a great trip." She turned to leave, gripping the strap of her bag a little tighter than necessary. But just as she reached the door, Linda's voice called after her. "Wait, actually, I have a better idea." Angela turned a hint of curiosity, replacing the disappointment on her face. Linda smiled, a spark of excitement lighting her eyes. "I'm only going for a short trip, just the weekend. What if you came with me?" Angela blinked. "What, I mean it," Linda said, stepping forward. "You need a break, Angela. When was the last time you took a vacation? It might do you good to get away for a few days, clear your head, why not?" Angela hesitated, torn between her instinct to stay and continue her daily vigil and the temptation of escape, even if just for a weekend. "I don't know." "Linda, it's so last minute, that's the beauty of it," Linda insisted. "No time to overthink the flights at 8:00 p.m. We could be on a beautiful beach by tomorrow morning. What do you say?" Angela looked back at Isabel's poster, then at Linda's hopeful face. Maybe a change of scenery would help. Maybe she'd come back with renewed energy to continue her search. "All right," she said, surprising herself. "I'll do it." Angela looked back at Isabel's poster, then at Linda's hopeful face. Maybe a change of scenery would help. Maybe she'd come back with renewed energy to continue her search. "All right," she said, surprising herself. "I'll do it." Linda beamed, pulling Angela into another quick hug. "Wonderful. I'll see you at the airport in an hour. Pack light. We'll only be gone for the weekend," as Linda hurried off to make arrangements. Angela stood there, still somewhat stunned by her impulsive decision. She made her way to her food vendor stall, where her trusted employee Luca was busy serving customers. "Luca," she called, pulling him aside. "I need a favor. I'm going away for the weekend. Can you handle closing up tonight and send me the sales recap?" Luca's eyebrows was shot up in surprise, but he quickly nodded. "Of course, Angela. Don't worry about a thing. It's about time you took a break." Angela smiled gratefully, realizing how much she relied on Luca's steady presence. Without him, she might have given up on the business years ago as she left the mall and headed home to pack. Angela's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement at the prospect of a spontaneous trip warred, with guilt over leaving even for a few days. But as she threw a few essentials into a small suitcase, she couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this trip was exactly what she needed, a chance to recharge, to gain a new perspective. With one last glance at the framed photo of Isabel on her nightstand, Angela zipped up her suitcase and called a taxi as she locked her front door. She whispered a silent promise to her missing daughter. "I'll never stop looking for you, Isabel. But maybe, just maybe, this trip will help me find the strength to keep going." The taxi arrived, and Angela climbed in, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. As the familiar streets of Miami slipped by outside the window, she allowed herself for the first time in years to look forward to something, even if it was just a weekend away. It felt like the first step on a new journey, one that might somehow lead her back to Isabel. Angela navigated the crowded Miami airport, gripping her suitcase tightly as she met Linda at the gate check-in counter. Linda excitedly shared details about their destination, a private beachside villa, and refused to let Angela pay her back for the flight, insisting it was a gift. After a 2.5-hour flight, they landed in Puerto Rico just before midnight, stepping out into the humid night air before hailing a taxi to their destination. The ride wound through dark streets lined with lush tropical foliage, the ocean occasionally visible under the moonlight. When they arrived, the villa was a sprawl, single-story home with large windows that gleamed under the night sky. Inside, the interior was warm and inviting, a perfect blend of tropical luxury and comfort. Linda had mentioned that the villa belongs to her best friend, who was also her business partner, and for years she had the freedom to come here on short notice. Whenever she wanted, her friend had even given her a key to the property. Linda insisted Angela take the master bedroom with the ocean view alone. At last, Angela sat on the bed, overwhelmed by the drastic shift from her reality earlier that morning. Posting missing person flyers for Isabel, she changed into her sleepwear, and just before she slept, she took her phone and scrolled through old photos of her daughter like every other night's, her heart aching as she traced her little girl's face on the screen. Silent tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered a promise into the darkness, hoping Isabel was safe, wherever she may be. The luxury of the villa offered no relief to the aching, longing heart that yearned years for her daughter as exhaustion took over. Angela listened to the rhythmic crash of waves outside. A thought, fragile but persistent, crept into her mind. Perhaps this trip was more than an escape. Perhaps it was a chance to gather strength to rekindle hope. With that, she drifted into a restless sleep, Isabel's face lingering in her dreams. The first rays of Caribbean sunlight filtered through the curtain, gently rousing Angela from her slumber. For a moment she lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, as the events of the previous day came rushing back, she sat up, taking in the luxurious master bedroom of the villa. Angela slipped out of bed, her bare feet padding. Softly on the cool tile floor, she made her way to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the beach just beyond the villa's backyard. The sight of the turquoise waters and pristine sand momentarily took her breath away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Linda's voice came from behind her, startling Angela slightly. She turned to see her friend already dressed for the day, a warm smile on her face. "Linda, this place is incredible. I can't believe we're staying here." "Did you sleep okay last night?" Angela managed a small smile. "Better than I have in a long time, actually. And that view, Linda, it's absolutely stunning." Linda beamed, clearly pleased. "I knew you'd love it. There's nothing quite like waking up to the sound and sight of the ocean." "Is there?" Angela nodded in agreement, her gaze drawn once again to the expanse of sea visible through the large sliding glass doors. "I can't remember the last time I saw something so peaceful." Linda's expression softened with understanding. "Well, we have the whole day to enjoy it. How about some breakfast? There's a lovely little cafe just down the beach. We could take a walk and grab something to eat." The idea of a leisurely beach walk and breakfast sounded appealing, and Angela found herself nodding. "That sounds perfect." They slipped on sandals and made their way out of the villa through the back door. Angela's breath caught as she stepped onto the wooden deck that overlooked a sparkling swimming pool. Beyond the pool, a small gate separated the villa's property from the public beach. As they passed through the gate and stepped onto the warm sand, Angela felt a strange mix of emotions. The beauty of her surroundings was undeniable. Yet there was a part of her that felt guilty for enjoying it. She pushed the feeling aside, trying to focus on the present moment, as Linda had encouraged her to do. They strolled along the narrow, sandy path that ran parallel to the shoreline. The beach was relatively quiet at this early hour, with only a few early morning joggers and dog walkers in sight. The sound of gentle waves lapping at the shore created a soothing backdrop to their walk as they neared the cafe Linda had mentioned. Angela noticed that a section of the beach further down was cordoned off. Curious, she squinted against the morning sun, trying to make out what was happening in the distance. "Oh my," Linda exclaimed, having noticed the same thing. "It looks like there's some sort of event going on down there." "Indeed." As they drew closer, and Angela could see an elaborate setup on the beach. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch decorated with flowers, and what appeared to be the beginnings of a reception area being set up a wedding. Angela murmured, a pang of wistfulness hitting her. Unexpectedly, she remembered her own wedding day, how full of hope and joy she had been. It felt like a lifetime ago. They reached the cafe, a charming open-air establishment with tables set out on a wooden deck overlooking the beach as the staff greeted them. Linda eagerly struck up a conversation with one of the employees, her curiosity about the event clear in her voice. "Excuse me," she called to a passing waiter. "Could you tell us about the event happening down the beach?" The young man smiled politely. "Ah, yes. That's a private wedding being held at the Villa Daughte. It's one of the largest properties on this stretch of the beach, owned by a very wealthy family. They've closed off that section of the beach for today. It's their private property." Linda thanked him for the information, then turned back to Angela with a gleam of excitement in her eyes. How interesting. I wonder who the couple is. It must be quite the affair to have such an elaborate setup." Angela nodded absently, her gaze drawn back to the wedding preparations in the distance as they stood watching the preparations. Angela felt a strange mix of emotions. The sight of the wedding with all its promise of love and new beginnings stirred something within her. For a brief moment she allowed herself to imagine a future where she might feel joy again, where the weight of her loss didn't overshadow every moment. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was interrupted by the sound of clapping and cheerful voices. The crowd erupted into applause, and Angela and Linda turned their attention to the grand villa. It was clear something was happening as they watched a couple appeared from the villa walking down the aisle in front of a small gathering of guests. Linda leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Oh, look," Linda exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. It must be the bride and groom. Angela could see that Linda was entranced by the spectacle. Her gaze following the bride and groom as they walked gracefully toward the altar. There weren't many people at the event, just a handful of guests scattered in the background. But the intimacy of the occasion made it all the more striking. Angela guessed it was a private family event, a gathering of only the closest relatives and friends. She whispered to Angela, "I wonder who these people are. This wedding looks like it costs a fortune." But when the bride and groom came into full view, both women were stunned. The bride was no older than 10 or 11, with her innocent face and small figure. The groom, on the other hand, was an elderly man, his wrinkled face and slows, deliberate steps clearly betraying his age. Angela and Linda exchanged a confused glance, unsure if they were seeing things right. For a moment, they both laughed softly, unsure of what to make of it. "Is that the bride that can't be right?" Angela asked incredulously. Linda chuckled, shaking her head in disbelief. "I thought she must be the groom's granddaughter at first," she said, a bit of a nervous laugh in her voice. "Maybe he's the father of the groom or the bride." Angela squinted, trying to make sense of the scene before her. They continued to observe the odd scene unfolding before them as they watched it. It became clear that no other couple had emerged from the villa, and Linda, feeling the growing bewilderment, turned to Angela and whispered, "Where's the groom and the bride?" Angela hesitated, then spoke quietly, as if trying to make sense of it herself. "Maybe the elderly man is the groom," she suggested, her voice laced with uncertainty. "He might not be the parent. Maybe the girl is his granddaughter, or she..." Trailed off her mind, searching for a plausible explanation. But then again, maybe he is the groom, and they're just waiting for the bride. "It's normal for the groom to wait for the bride to appear, right?" Linda nodded. Though she still wasn't entirely convinced, they continued watching both of them, trying to piece together what was happening as the couple walked solemnly down the aisle. Their steps slow and deliberate, as if each was carefully measured. The sounds of the ocean crashing against the shore seemed whirled away from the quiet tension around them. But as they watched, something began to unsettle Linda. There was an air of sadness about the girl, unlike any other child she had seen at a wedding, who would usually be beaming with excitement. This girl looked so solemn, her face was downcast, her eyes distant. It didn't sit right with Linda. The guests, too, were quiet. Too quiet, there was no Lively chatter, no excited murmur of admiration at the beauty of the bride. No one taking photos. The atmosphere felt cold, stifled, not at all what Linda had come to associate with weddings. She noticed guards standing at each side of the event, stationed like sentinels, their eyes scanning the area. Angela's curiosity piqued, and she couldn't help but wonder. Who are these people? What kind of rich family is behind this? As the couple reached the front of the aisle toward the officiant, Linda noticed something else. The girl didn't stand on the elderly man's side. Instead, she took a position facing the guests, standing to the right side of the officiant, across the man. For a brief moment, the girl's gaze swept in Linda and Angela's direction. And that's when it hit Angela. She could see the girl's face from far, and an icy chill ran through her body. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features. Linda whispered, "Why is she standing there? She can't be the bride, but..." Angela was silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on the girl. There was something about her that made Angela's breath catch in her throat. She squinted and took a closer look. Her heart skipped a beat. No, it can't be. But the girl looked so much like her own daughter. So similar, in fact, that Angela's mind couldn't help but spin. Of the unmistakable resemblance, Linda. Angela whispered, her voice trembling, She looks like my daughter Isabel. Don't you think?" Linda turned to her, concern etched across her face. I'm not so sure, Angela. It's quite a distance from here, and about Isabel. I don't think so. It's been 4 years, maybe? It's just a resemblance. Angela stood, frozen, unable to tear her eyes away from the young girl. I know. It sounds crazy, but there's something about her. The way she moves, the shape of her face. It's like looking at a ghost. Linda stared at her. Are you serious, or are you imagining things? It could be the trauma, Angela. You're seeing things that aren't there. But why is she standing like that? It's as if she's the bride. Look at her face. Look at the way the guests are acting. No one's reacting like they're at a wedding. Linda paused, her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of it, right? But if she's the bride, why would they still be waiting for the ceremony to begin? It doesn't make sense. If she was the bride, they would have started right away. Angela exhaled sharply, trying to ground herself. You're right. That girl can't be the bride. There are guests and the officiant there. They won't let something like that happen, she suggested, though doubt lingered in her voice. It's possible they're waiting for the bride to make her entrance. Linda nodded slowly, her concern still heavy. You're right, she said. They must be just the family. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the surroundings. Anyway, maybe we should leave. We shouldn't linger here, staring at other people's private lives. One of the guards might come over and catch us. Looking. Linda started, turning away. Stepping back toward the cafe, but Angela hesitated. Her curiosity was goring at her, and she couldn't let go of the strange connection she felt. The girl with a quiet determination. Angela took a few steps closer, just to see the girl more clearly. But before she could get too close, 2 security guards appeared, moving swiftly and silently. In her direction, their serious, unreadable expressions made Angela's heart race. This is private property, one of them said coldly. You're not allowed to be here. Angela felt a chill run through her, the heaviness of their presence hanging in the air like a threat. The guard's manner was so stern, so icy, that Angela instinctively took a step back. The feeling that something was amiss in this wedding became undeniable. I'm sorry, Angela murmured, stepping away, her eyes wide with uncertainty as she turned to leave. She spotted Linda hurrying toward her from the cafe, concern etched into her features. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice tinged with worry. Why did you come so close, Angela? Shrugged, her mind still racing. I'm not sure, she admitted quietly. I was just curious. Linda's gaze softened as she realized what had driven Angela's steps. It's because of the girl? Isn't it? She asked, her voice gentle. Now you think she looks like your daughter? Angela nodded slowly, her throat tight. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Linda steadied her voice, taking Angela's hand in hers. It does, but let's go. We've got a lot to do today, with a final glance back at the wedding. Angela reluctantly followed Linda, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't quite put into words. The strange resemblance, the unsettling atmosphere, and the guarded silence of the event. All of it left her with a nagging sense of unease that wouldn't fade. The warm Puerto Rican sun hung in the air, its light soft but insistent. As Linda and Angela made their way back to the villa, Linda had insisted on ordering coffee to go, a quiet yet firm suggestion, to avoid Angela lingering too long by the beach and watching the wedding procession. Angela hadn't protested, knowing the importance of shaking off her unease and the images of the strange wedding. Seen as they walked back through the villa's garden, a muffled sound reached their ears, followed by the gentle strains of music drifting across the air. The wedding had ayali begun inside. They sat at the dining table for a simple breakfast. The clink of cutlery against plates, the only sound save for the distant hum of the ocean. The beach now seemed a world away. Angela absent-mindedly pushed a piece of fruit around on her plate. Her thoughts still tangled with the unsettling scene they'd witnessed earlier. The girl's face, her uncanny resemblance to her daughter, wouldn't leave her mind breaking the silence. Linda casually mentioned to Angela, "I should call the masseuse my best friend, and I always do it when we're in Puerto Rico. It's a nice way to unwind." Angela nodded, understanding that she needed a distraction. That sounds perfect. A little relaxation will help clear my head, I guess. Linda picked up her phone, dialing the number of the trusted local masseuse. She spoke briefly into the receiver, confirming the appointment, and then settled back into her seat, thinking that a massage might be exactly what Angela needed to calm her mind. Minutes later, the sound of a soft knock echoed from the front door. The masseuse had arrived. As she entered, Angela, who has been checking her phone, turned to Linda. "Actually, Linda, you go first, if you don't mind. Why you should go first?" "Angela, I made the booking for you. I'm sorry, but I just remembered that I still need to make a call to Lutzer. He should have sent me the recap of yesterday's sales by now," Angela explained. "I see, okay. Then I will only take an hour, so you won't wait too long," Linda replied. She spoke with the masseuse and retreated into her own room. Angela, left alone in the living room, sank herself into the sofa by the window, her phone in hand, and she focused her mind as she studied the record sale that Luca has just sent. However, the steady hum of the wedding music, now louder, with the wind carrying it, kept drawing her attention. Each second passed, and it became harder to focus. Her eyes kept straying to the beach outside before it flicked back to her screen. She saw the transaction from Luca had gone through. Her money was in her account now, but her mind was elsewhere. The music from the wedding drifted in like an insistent memory, pulling her thoughts back to the beach. Angela glanced at the clock. She still had time before Linda would be finished, and the impulse to go back to the beach to see the girl again gwayed at her with a sense of resolve. She stood up, made her way to the door, and stepped outside. The heat of the sun wrapped around her like a blanket as she walked back toward the beach. The music still echoed across the space, lively now with a rhythmic beat. Guests milled around the area, the sound of their laughter and conversation barely audible over the speakers. Angela peered through the crowd, and there among the guests she saw it again, the young girl, her face in profile as she danced with the elderly man. The image hit Angela like a wave, the resemblance to her daughter growing stronger the longer she stared. It can't be her, Angela thought, but the resemblance gnawed at her. Nonetheless, what is going on? She needed to know. To put this strange feeling to rest, she needed to understand who this villa belonged to, who the family was, to at least calm her mind. She couldn't keep walking around, feeling like there was a puzzle in front of her, one she couldn't solve. Determined, she walked toward the street and approached the villa from the front side of it. It was grand, imposing from the street. With every step closer, her thoughts became clearer. I have to know. But as she reached the front gate and rang the bell, she realized it was only the maid who stood on the other side. Angela felt a flicker of disappointment, but still she pressed on. "Excuse me," she called gently. "I was just wondering about the wedding. Could you tell me who the family is?" The maid's face remained neutral as she replied, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm afraid the owners are not available to speak right now. Only they can provide information about the wedding." She looked briefly to the side before adding, "They on the beach, having a private matrimony? I'm not allowed to interrupt them." Angela frowned, her curiosity still buzzing in her chest. "But who are they?" she pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Can I speak with them later?" The maid gave no further answer, her expression closing off. "I'm sorry, I cannot provide you with any more details," she said curtly before turning toward the villa. "I must insist you leave. The owners are not available." Angela felt a chill settle over her as the maid turned her back, her resolve hardening, but just then the sudden appearance of a man broke the tension. He emerged from the street behind her. The maid's demeanor shifted instantly, her face lighting up in recognition. "Good morning, Mr. Langworth." She greeted him with a practiced smile, opening the gate wide for him. The man was tall, well-dressed in a dark suit, his features sharp. Calculating, he paused as his gaze landed on Angela. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice initially warm, though there was something guarded about it. Angela, taken off guard by the unexpected encounter, stuttered, unsure how to explain her presence. I wanted to congratulate your family on the wedding," she said awkwardly, offering a strained smile. Mr. Langworth's expression faltered for a split second. Then his eyes narrowed, and, "Who are you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone colder now. Angela, still flustered, gave her name. Angela Harrow. The moment the name left her lips, she saw his face freeze. It was like a switch flipped and the warmth in his eyes evaporated. His demeanor shifted entirely, turning sharp and dismissive. "I don't have time for this," he said abruptly, his voice cutting through the air. "Please leave. We're having a family event." Before Angela could protest, he turned on his heel and strode back toward the villa without another word. The maid quickly shut the door, her face impassive. Angela stood there, her chest tightening as she tried to process what had just happened. The coldness in Mr. Langworth's tone and the sudden shift in his attitude. It was all too much. What had she just stumbled into? She turned slowly, walking away, the weight of the encounter heavy on her shoulders. Angela's mind raced as she made her way back to the villa she shared with Linda. The encounter with Mr. Langworth had left her shaken, and the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong grew stronger with each step as she approached the villa. She saw Linda standing at the back door, a look of concern etched on her face. "Angela, where have you been?" Linda called out, rushing to meet her friend. "I finished my massage and couldn't find you anywhere. I was worried sick." Angela took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "I'm sorry, Linda. I went back to the beach. I couldn't stop thinking about that girl." Linda's expression softened, but there was a hint of exasperation in her voice. "Oh, Angela, I understand, but you can't keep doing this to yourself. It's not healthy." They made their way inside, and Angela sank into the sofa, her body suddenly feeling heavy with the weight of her emotions. Linda sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "Tell me what happened," Linda said gently. Angela recounted her encounter with Mr. Langworth, describing the man's sudden change in demeanor. When she gave her name as she spoke, she could see the concern growing in Linda's eyes. "Angela, I understand this is difficult, but we can't jump to conclusions about something sinister," Linda said, trying to offer a more rational perspective. "There might be a completely innocent explanation for all of this. Maybe he misinterpreted your actions as an intrusion on their privacy, but—" Angela shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. "You didn't see his face, Linda, the way he looked at me when I said my name. It was like he'd seen, I don't know, a ghost, and that girl I saw her dancing with her grandfather. She looked so much like Isabel. I can't shake. The feeling that there's a connection. Linda sighed, torn between wanting to support her friend and fearing that Angela was letting her grief cloud her judgment. All right, let's think about this logically. We need more information before we jump to any conclusions. Angela nodded, grateful for Linda's level-headedness. You're right, but how do we find out more? Linda thought for a moment, then stood up and retrieved her laptop from her room. Let's start with what we know. The family's name was Langworth, right? We can do some research on the family for the next hour. Angela and Linda scoured the internet for information on the Langworth family, who lives or owns a property at Puerto Rico. They soon discovered that the family owned a large hotel chain and had properties across the country. William Langworth, the elderly man they had seen at the wedding, was the patriarch of the family and a well-known figure in the business world. And the man that Angela met by the gate was his son. As they delved deeper, they found articles about the family's philanthropy, their business ventures, and their lavish lifestyle. But nothing they found seemed to explain the strange wedding they had witnessed, or the reaction Angela had received from Mr. Langworth. This doesn't make sense, Angela muttered, frustration evident in her voice. They seem like a normal, wealthy family, but why would they react so strongly to my name? Linda leaned back, rubbing her temples. I don't know, Angela. Perhaps he was just in a hurry. But we need to be careful. These people are powerful, and we don't want to accuse them of anything without solid evidence. Angela nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. She pulled out her phone and opened a folder of photos she kept of Isabel. Among them was a digital age progression image that the police had created a few months ago, showing what Isabel might look like in 4 years after her disappearance. Linda, look at this, Angela said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held up the phone to her. Linda leaned in, her eyes widening as she studied the girl. The resemblance was striking, impossible to ignore. Oh my God, Linda breathed. Angela, I don't know what to say. She kept looking at Angela's phone before the realization came up to her. Let me find about her in the internet. She quickly started typing Langsworth granddaughter into the browser, her fingers moving swiftly across the keys. After a few moments of scrolling, however, she found no information about the girl, only dead ends. Angela felt a surge of emotions, hope, fear, anger, and determination, all swirling together. We need to do something, Linda. We can't just sit here knowing what we know. It could be Isabel if she's the real granddaughter of William Langsworth. Why wasn't she mentioned anywhere in media? Linda nodded slowly, her earlier skepticism fading in the face of this new evidence. You're right, but we need to be smart about this. We can't just confront them directly. We need more information and evidence. A plan. Any ideas? Angela stood up, pacing the room. As she tried to think clearly, they dwelled deeper into research, trying to find some links between the Langsworth family activities around the time of Isabel's disappearance. But no matter how hard they looked, they found no hint of any connection whatsoever. I need some air, Angela said, suddenly setting down her untouched coffee. I'm going for a walk on the beach. Linda looked concerned, but nodded, feeling the same urgency to break free from the enclosed space. All right, I'm coming with you. As they stepped outside, the midday sun greeted them with a blaze of warmth. They made their way toward the beach, intending to walk in the opposite direction. But when they casted a glance toward the wedding area, something caught their eye. The once vibrant wedding site had transformed the guests. The decorations, everything was gone. No one remained, only the remains of the event scattered across the sand. Staff moved briskly, disassembling the elaborate props, taking down the tenant. Packing up the chairs. Linda paused, a frown tugging at her lips. That's odd, she muttered, her eyes scanning the deserted space. Usually they leave the decorations up for the evening reception. Angela squinted in the direction of the villa, a strange chill creeping down her spine. The man from before the Langsworth son? He looked like he saw a ghost. When he saw me, he must have called the whole thing off. Something's not right here, Linda. This can't be a coincidence. Linda turned to her, her face serious. In any other situation, I wouldn't believe everything you said, Angela, but this, it's strange they're wrapping everything up early. It doesn't add up. Without another word, they quickened their pace, heading toward the private beach. As they neared the area, they noticed a significant change. The security guards had vanished, and in their place were several staff members dressed in plain uniforms, marked with the name of the service company. The workers were silently cleaning up, gathering trash, and clearing away the last traces of the event. No one seemed to pay them any attention. So Angela and Linda moved closer, their curiosity pulling them forward. The beach was still eerily quiet now that the celebration had ended. As they stood on the edge, Angela's eyes moved to the villa, her gaze fixed on the windows. As they moved closer, the view became clearer, and Angela's heart began to race through the glass. She saw her, the girl, her face so familiar, yet out of place in this strange setting. Look, Angela whispered, pointing toward the figure in the window. Linda's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the girl. The resemblance to Angela's daughter was undeniable. She looks just like Isabel, Linda said, her voice barely audible. Angela's chest, T.I., frightened, the truth sinking in. The girl's aquamarine blue eyes gleamed in the sunlight, and Angela felt a lump form in her throat. That's her, she said, her voice trembling with certainty. Those eyes, just like Isabel's. Before they could speak further, the girl seemed to recoil from an elderly man who had approached her, attempting to embrace her. She pushed him away, her body language telling the whole story. Angela's heart ached as she watched the interaction unfold. This wasn't a normal, happy family scene. Suddenly, a voice interrupted their observations. A security guard, his tone sharp, shouted toward them, "You again! I've told you this is private property. You need to leave." Linda and Angela shared a fleeting glance, but neither made a move. They were too captivated by what was unfolding inside. The cleaning staff, hired from an outside service, barely acknowledged their presence, focusing on their task, while the security guard issued commands. Angela's gaze remained locked on the girl, unable to look away as the tension in the situation continued to rise. The guard reached for his radio, speaking quickly into it. Angela's gut twisted. "They calling for backup," she muttered, her voice laced with dread. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone else would show up moments later. 2 more security guards appeared, flanking the elderly man. Angela and Linda immediately recognized him. His presence alone sent a ripple of discomfort through the air. He whispered something to the guards, and without hesitation, they began walking toward Angela and Linda. At first, the 2 women thought the guards would merely repeat the demand for them to leave. But instead, the guards spoke in a different tone, their words unexpected. "The boss wants to speak with you." Angela and Linda followed the guards through the private beach, the silence between them growing heavier with each step as they reached the man. William Langsworth, he turned to face them, his expression cold and imperious. His gaze flicked between them before settling on Angela, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I've heard multiple reports of your presence since this morning," he said, his tone laced with annoyance. "What are you doing here?" Angela's jaw tightened, and she didn't flinch when she spoke. "If you've heard those reports, then you know exactly who I am." "I met your son." William's lip curled into a sneer. "I know who you are, Angela Haro," he said with biting emphasis. "A childless widow working at South Key Mall for that pathetic salad baron. Now do you know who I am?" Angela's fists clenched at her sides, but she didn't take the bait. "I don't care who you are," her voice low, but fierce. "The only reason I'm childless is because you took my daughter from me 4 years ago." William let out a laugh, dark and mirthless. "Who took your daughter? Do you have a single shred of proof to back up your accusations?" His voice dripped with condescension as he stepped closer. His presence imposing. Angela didn't hesitate. "I saw the girl. She has the same blue eyes, the same features as my daughter. William's eyes flickered a brief moment of hesitation before he composed himself. Without another word, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a check. His hand moving with deliberate slowness, Angela watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as he scribbled something on the check, then handed it to her with a smirk. "Here," he said, his voice smooth and calculating. "Take it and leave. Never come back. Never speak of this again. Let's just say this is the bride price. With this, you can build up your pathetic salad bar and live a good life." No matter how you want. Angela's vision blurred as she stared at the check, 500,000. The amount seemed surreal, like a slap in the face. Her hands shook with fury as she bowled her fists, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. "How dare you!" she yelled, her voice breaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "How could you do this to an innocent girl? What did I do to you? That you do this to my family?" William's expression darkened, a cruel glint in his eye. "Innocent," he scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You should think twice before calling her that. Your daughter's biggest mistake was being too pretty for her own good. She's not innocent anymore." He winked maliciously, his grin sending an icy chill down Angela's spine. Angela's chest constricted, her stomach turning, her heart shattered as she realized the horrific implications of his words. You!" she gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief. "What did you do to her?" William's smile widened, cold, triumphant look crossing his face. "I did nothing," he said casually, his words slicing through the air. "Yes, I have trouble restraining myself, and God forbid. But hey, she's my wife now. I have every right." Angela felt as though the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. Her breath caught in her throat, a sob choking her. She couldn't move, could barely breathe. Anger and despair surged through her. Her hands trembling as tears filled her eyes. She took a step forward, her chest heaving with the need to confront him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused, but before she could move any closer, the security guards seized her, their hands like iron around her arms. They shoved her back, their force overpowering her. Angela struggled against them, but they held her firm, their grip relentless. Linda's heart broke as she watched the scene unfold, her own fury matching Angela's. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her hands shaking with the urgency of the moment. The man laughed once more, a cold, heartless sound that echoed in the air. "The police. Yeah, right." Angela could only watch as William and the guards turned and walked back toward the villa, her vision blurred with tears, her body trembling with rage and heartbreak. She was powerless, but the fire of vengeance smoldered in her chest. Angela sat on the sand, her body trembling as the grains clung to her legs and thighs. Her face was streaked with tears, her heart heavy with the unbearable weight of the truth she had just learned. The agony in her chest was raw, deep, and relentless, and no matter how much she tried to quiet her sobs, they kept rising within her. Linda stood beside her, silent and at a loss for words, knowing that nothing she could say would ease the searing pain of a mother whose child had been stolen away, then violated in the most unimaginable way. Linda gently placed a hand on Angela's back, trying to offer some comfort. But even she could feel the hopelessness in the air. She had no answers, no way to undo what had been done, and no words that could bring the woman beside her even a shred of peace. Then, through the haze of silence, they heard the unmistakable sound of sirens. A piercing wail that grew louder as it approached. The sound sliced through the heavy air and filled Angela's chest with a spark of hope. Maybe this was what they needed. Maybe, just maybe, the police would finally make things right. Linda squeezed Angela's hand, urging her to stand. "We have to go to the police," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. Angela, her heart still in tatters, nodded. They moved slowly, Angela's legs unsteady as she fought to regain some semblance of control. They walked to the street side, their feet dragging through the sand as the sound of sirens grew louder, until they reached the front of the property. 2 police cars were parked at the villa's long driveway, their flashing lights illuminating the otherwise bright afternoon. 2 officers were approaching the gate, their expressions unreadable. When they reached the villa's front, an officer from the second car approached them, his tone commanding as he told them to stay back. Angela looked past him, her gaze flicking to William Langsworth, who was accompanied by his 2 bodyguards. She watched as he argued heatedly with the officers at the gate. Then, after a few moments, both he and the officers disappeared into the villa. The quiet that followed was unsettling. Linda looked at Angela, her brow furrowed. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. The officer who had approached them didn't answer immediately. His eyes wary, his silence was all too telling. Angela's stomach twisted, the realization hit her like a slap in the face. The man was likely trying to talk and buy his way out and keep the officers. Was silent to bury the truth along with his secrets, her fingers tightened around the check, still burning a hole in her pocket. Imagining the officers greedily accepting even a fraction of the bribe, she glanced at Linda, her heart sinking, but she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when she was this close. She turned to the officer beside them, her voice desperate. "Please," she began, her words trembling. "I've been missing my daughter for 4 years. Please, you have to help me. I have proof." She pulled out her phone, showing him the poster of her daughter, her eyes pleading. "This is her. You have to do something. That man took her." Then, Angela pulled the check from her pocket and showed it to the officer, too. The officer's expression softened, though he still seemed stunned by the severity of her words. He hesitated, then radioed the 2 officers inside the house. When no one copied, he then radioed the station, calling for backup. Angela's breath caught as she heard him relaying the situation. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The officer didn't seem swayed by the man's wealth or influence. He was taking this seriously. Angela exchanged a hopeful glance with Linda, her heart racing as she crossed her fingers, in the hope that everything would work out for a moment. It felt like they were finally moving toward justice. More backup arrived, but still there was no sign of the 2 officers who had entered the villa. It was unnervingly quiet. The minutes stretched on, each second like an eternity. Angela's anxiety flared, her body trembling with anticipation. In dread, finally, the officer stepped forward, his expression hardening. "It's been too long," he muttered to himself. "We need to check on our peers." He signaled to another officer to wait with Angela and Linda while the rest moved toward the door. Angela's pulse quickened as she watched them. The trio of office officers approached the villa and knocked firmly on the door, calling for a response. When no one answered, they didn't hesitate. One of the officers took the initiative and kicked the door open, the sound of splintering wood echoing in the tense air. The air was thick with tension as Angela, Linda, and the officers stood in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The officer who had stayed with them seemed increasingly unsettled, his unease evident in the way he shifted his gaze from the villa to the street, then like a slow-moving storm. A group of people emerged from the villa, escorted by the officers. Angela's heart skipped a beat as she recognized them, every member of the Langsworth family, including the maid and the bodyguards. They weren't in handcuffs, but their worried faces were unmistakable. There was no denying the fear in their eyes as they walked toward the police cars when their gazes met Angela's and Linda's. A mix of contempt and something else, something softer, tinged with sadness, flashed across their faces. The officers guided them into the cars, and without a moment's hesitation, the vehicles drove away, disappearing into the distance. Angela's breath caught in her chest as she turned her attention back to the scene unfolding before her. William Langsworth, the person who had taken her daughter, was being led out, his hands bound in handcuffs. Her heart beat faster as she watched him, the sight of him finally facing the consequences of his actions sending a wave of relief through her. But as he passed by, he turned to face her. his expression a twisted grin of malevolence. "This is not done," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "I'll sue you for defamation, false report, and taking my wife." Then, his voice dropped low and sinister. "Or you can remember to be nice, and we can have a peaceful talk with my lawyer," he said, winking at her. The motion was so familiar that it made Angela's stomach churn, the check he had handed her earlier still burning a hole in her pocket. Flashed in her mind, she could almost hear his voice telling her to take it and leave. But she had refused. The police officer shoved him into the back of the squad car, his words fading as the door slammed shut. The car pulled away, carrying him to the station where his fate would be sealed. Angela barely had time to process what had just happened when Linda's voice broke through, pulling her attention to a new sight. Linda was pointing toward a small figure walking beside one of the officers. Angela's heart stuttered in her chest as she recognized the girl, her daughter Isabel. The little girl's eyes locked with Angela's, and there was an instant recognition. Before Angela could take a step forward, Isabel's voice rang out clear and trembling. "Mom, is that you? Are you here taking me home?" Angela's breath hitched as she fought back tears, her hands shaking as she took a tentative step toward her daughter. Isabel's face was full of confusion, but her eyes, those same familiar blue eyes, were wide with hope and longing. The moment their gazes met, the world around them seemed to disappear before Angela could say anything. The officer, too, seemed to realize what was happening. He stood back, allowing mother and daughter to meet in the middle. Isabel rushed into Angela's arms, clinging to her with all the strength she had left. "Mom, let's go home." Tears streamed down her face, her voice trembling between sobs. "I promise I won't bother you when you shop. Again, I promise I'll be good." Angela could hardly speak, her chest tightening with the weight of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. In 4 long years, she shook her head, her voice a broken whisper. "You were never a bad kid," she choked out. "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. Those were bad men who took you. And it was all my mistake." Isabel pulled back slightly, her small hands touching Angela's tear-streaked face. "Mom, don't cry like that," she said softly, her voice filled with concern. Angela sobbed, pulling her daughter back into her arms, holding her as if she might disappear again. Linda stood quietly beside them, tears in her own eyes as she watched the long-awaited reunion unfold. There was no more anger, no more pain, only the overwhelming relief of a mother holding her child again. As Angela stood up, her knees stiff and weak, she held Isabel close, her fingers trembling as she gently brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. She looked into her eyes, her heart filled with so much emotion that words couldn't seem to capture it. "I think we'll need to go to the police station first." "Sweetheart," Angela whispered softly, her voice cracking. "The police would want to speak to us, but I promise I'll never leave you again." Isabel nodded, the confusion and fear still in her eyes, slowly giving way to the comfort of her mother's presence. Angela felt the weight of everything that had happened, but she knew this was just the beginning of the long journey to justice and restoration. There was no turning back now. The social worker, who introduced herself as Elizabeth Milton, approached them cautiously, her expression calm but with a knowing sadness. "We need to get to the station," she said softly. "There are some things we need to sort out, but we'll take care of you both." Angela gave her a slight nod of understanding, silently grateful for the woman's presence. Miss Milton had a way of speaking that reassured Angela, a calmness that made her feel like she wasn't alone in this. She reached out to Linda, who had been standing nearby, her face filled with concern and relief together. The small group of them, Angela, Isabel, Linda, and the social worker, headed toward the police car waiting for them. The officers had already made sure the vehicle was ready as Angela helped Isabel into the back seat. She felt the tension in the air thicken, but at least for the first time in years, they were moving forward. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, the sound echoing in Angela's chest. She sat beside Isabel, her arms securely around her daughter, not letting go as the car pulled away from the villa. Angela glanced out of the window, her mind still swirling the Langsworth, the lies, the wealth. But none of it mattered now. The most important thing was Isabel here with her. They were together again, and that was all that mattered. Once they arrived at the police station, the weight of the situation began to sink in, even deeper. The harsh fluorescent lights in the lobby seemed to illuminate the tension in the air. A stark contrast to the warm, comforting glow of the villa where they had just left. Angela held Isabel's hand tightly, her fingers intertwined with her daughter's, as if afraid that if she let go for even a second, this moment of safety would slip away. Inside, the officers informed them that they needed to conduct interviews. But Isabel refused to be separated from her mother. "I won't leave you," she insisted, her voice small but firm. Angela's heart ached as she looked into her daughter's wide eyes. But she knew she couldn't let her go either. The police agreed to allow them to stay together in the same room with the social worker, Miss Milton present to ensure Isabel's well-being. Linda was escorted to a separate room for her interview, and Angela could only hope her friend was as well cared for as she and Isabel were in their interview room. Angela took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she prepared to tell the police everything the officers in Puerto Rico had already begun coordinating with the Miami police, piecing together what had happened to her daughter, and how it all came to this point. The memories of those 4 years without Isabel, of the pain and uncertainty, threatened to overwhelm her. But she pushed them aside, focusing on the present, on what she had to do now. The officer, a tall man with a calm demeanor, spoke to her gently, but with authority. "We're going to need to perform a DNA test for legal defense purposes," he explained. "This is for the court proceedings to protect your case. When it goes to trial, the Langsworth family will likely call it their lawyers soon." Angela nodded, trying to comprehend the weight of what he was saying. She wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. But hearing the police speak with such certainty only solidified the reality that she was finally going to bring this family to justice. Angela swallowed hard, her mind racing. "Have you heard anything from the family yet? Have they spoken?" The officer shook his head. "The Langsworth have refused to speak, all of them. They've invoked their right to remain silent and have requested their lawyers. But there are some others who've come forward." He looked at her, his expressions somber. "One of Mr. Langsworth's bodyguards, Raul. Santiago has confessed he admitted to taking Isabel that day from the restroom. He's been spying on the child care center for months, getting familiar with the mall security cameras, even bribing staff to help him. He targeted the children, took pictures, and sent them to Langsworth so he could choose." Angela felt sick as the officer continued. "Rule says he was paid handsomely for the kidnapping. But now he says he couldn't live with himself anymore. He felt guilty, and when we questioned him, he confessed it all." "Did he say how they did it?" Angela asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the officer said, his face hardening. "Rule admitted that he sedated your daughter in the restroom. He caused a distraction by setting off the fire alarm to cover his escape. Then he took her, got her into a car, and left without a trace. It seems Mr. Langsworth had prepared all the documents to transport your daughter here to Puerto Rico." Angela's breath caught in her throat, and she squeezed Isabel's hand tighter, trying to keep her composure. Her daughter had been through so much, and hearing the details of what had happened, of the brutality and deception involved, made her heart ache. "But that's not all," the officer continued. "We also spoke with one of the maids who revealed that Mr. Langsworth had a pattern of choosing children to bring into his household under the guise of marriage. He had been married 5 times unofficially, of course, consistently seeking a new child every decade. The maid admitted to being part of the family's inner circle, explaining that Langsworth's father had purchased her from her parents. When she was young, she had served the family for decades, catering to all their demands, no matter how disturbing based on our current findings. Suspect that the entire family is remaining silent to shield Mr. Langsworth, whom they see as the central and most powerful figure, the one holding their wealth and business together. Angela could hardly process what the officer was telling her. She couldn't fathom the cruelty of it all. These people thought they were above the law, above morality, simply because they had wealth and power. The more she heard, the more disgusted she became. But also the more determined she felt to bring that family to justice. Just then, the team that would gather her and Isabel's DNA swab arrived. Angela stood there watching them with a strange sense of relief, mixed with apprehension. This wasn't over yet. The road ahead would be long, and there would be battles in court. But for the first time in years, Angela felt like she was on the path to reclaiming her life and her daughter's future. As the sample was taken, Angela reflected on everything that had brought her here. Her mind drifted back to the moment when she first found out Isabel was missing the feeling of helplessness and terror that had consumed her. Now she was holding her daughter again, and although the fight wasn't over, there was hope. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for a future one where Isabel would never have to look over her shoulder in fear, where she could grow up free from the shadows of men like William Langsworth. Angela had been given her daughter back, and she would never let her go again. The Langsworth family, with all their money and power, might have thought they were untouchable. But Angela knew one thing for sure. They were wrong. She would make sure they paid for what they had done, and she would do it for her daughter, for Isabel, who was now safe in her arms once more.